Everybody's talking again. Sports media, social media, comment sections, all pushing the same idea, that the Caitlin Clark effect is over.
Well, let's talk about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA and sports media.
That teams aren't moving games anymore. That NBA arenas aren't filling up like last year. That fans supposedly lost interest. But when you slow this down and actually look at the numbers, the dates, and the context, that story doesn't hold up. Not even close. Welcome back to WNBA Shorts, where we break down what's actually happening in women's basketball, not just what people want the narrative to be. And if you care about real analysis instead of clickbait headlines, make sure you're subscribed, because this matters for how the league moves forward.
But we've got the sports media proclaiming that other WNBA teams have basically decided that the Caitlin Clark effect is over, that it's a wrap, that no longer do WNBA fans want to fill NBA arenas to watch Caitlin Clark play.
Now let's start with what kicked all of this off. The WNBA schedule was released, and almost immediately, people noticed something. Last season, 9 Indiana Fever road games were moved to larger arenas. This season, just 4. July 5th against the Aces, August 8th against the Sky, August 18th against Toronto, August 20th against Dallas. And based on that alone, the conclusion was rushed out. The Caitlin Clark effect is done. But that conclusion ignores multiple facts that are right in front of us. First, and this is the biggest factor in all of this,
involving Caitlin Clark and WNBA franchises. And we know the schedule came out the other day. Of course, there's still not a CBA deal in place. So there's that in all of this, and I would keep this in mind.
There's no CBA in place. None. That means teams do not know if the season will start exactly on time, if early season games could be lost, if revenue projections are reliable. And when teams don't have certainty, they don't rush to lock in larger venues. That's not opinion. That's standard operational behavior.
By the way, I believe all of this will change when the CBA is signed. I think that's the only reason this has happened. And I think you will see once the CBA gets signed, we get closer to the season, you will see a change where several other teams decide to move games over into NBA arenas.
Notice something important about those 4 moved Fever games this year. They're all later in the season. That's not random. That lines up perfectly with the idea that teams are waiting to see how the CBA situation plays out before committing to big arena logistics earlier in the calendar. Now, let's address another number that keeps getting misrepresented. Yes, the league as a whole moved 19 games this season, up from 15 last year. But that increase is not because demand shifted away from Caitlin Clark. It's because of expansion. Toronto is a brand new franchise. They're playing 5 home games outside of their primary arena, including games in Montreal and Vancouver. Those games inflate the total number of relocated games across the league. If you remove expansion from the equation, the comparison changes completely. This isn't about Clark losing pull. It's about new markets being introduced to the league.
But the WNBA and their leadership, they're just wearing a different shade of clown paint. The owners, some of them, like the ones with the Atlanta Dream, like the ones with the Washington Mystics. Anybody remember Sheila Johnson? Yeah. Everybody should be Time Athlete of the Year.
Now let's talk about attendance, because this is where the argument really collapses. Last season, the Indiana Fever were the biggest road draw in the entire league. Not close. They averaged 15,884 fans per road game. That's roughly 4,000 more per game than any other team. And every Fever road game that was moved to a larger arena sold out. Every single one. And here's the key part that gets ignored.
But Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever have significantly fewer of those games. The WNBA regular season schedule announced Wednesday included 19 games moved to different arenas, up from 15 games last year. This is what they're not telling you yet.
Caitlin Clark played in just 13 games last season. She appeared in only 3 of the 9 moved games, meaning most of those sellouts happened without her on the floor. So when people say, well, they still sold out, so what's the difference? Here's the difference. Ticket pricing. When it became clear that Caitlin Clark was not going to play in certain games, ticket prices dropped. That's not speculation. You could track it in real time.
I think she's the greatest of her time.
Played at LSU, but she's phenomenal. I'm going to go on the record and say she's the best female collegiate player ever.
She plays at a level that no one has reached yet in the WNBA. So, to me, I think she's going to take this league as far as she wants.
I said, I sure am glad you leaving. I said, girl, you something else. Never seen anything like it.
I'm going to be honest because it needs to be said. I know what it's like to be hated. I can't imagine this young lady, I don't want to use hate, but despised. I didn't know how talented she was.
The seats filled, but the premium disappeared. That tells you everything you need to know. Demand didn't vanish. The certainty premium did. Fans want to see her play in an actual Indiana Fever uniform, not just by the idea that she might play. And that brings us to the injury situation. The way last season was handled left a lot of fans frustrated. Timelines kept shifting. Updates were unclear. People believed she was coming back, only to find out later that there was another issue. That uncertainty affects behavior, not permanently, temporarily.
I think part of this is because, I think large part, if not all of it, is because they don't know what's going on with the CBA right now. All right? Because there's a world where they could lose games at the beginning of the year, and that we're looking up and we're getting a shortened season because they couldn't get CBA done.
Fans didn't stop caring. They stopped trusting timelines. And trust matters when people are deciding whether to pay top dollar for tickets months in advance. Now here's the part the media doesn't want to wait around for. The moment Caitlin Clark steps onto the floor healthy.
Oh, it's a triple-double for Caitlin. What a reaction by Kelsey. Well, how about the knowledgeable fans in this building? They burst out of their seats like it was a game winner. And Caitlin Clark has a triple-double. It's the second ever for a rookie, and they both belong to her. And Indiana has now won 7 of 8 out of the Olympic break. They're 18 and 16.
The moment she hits that first deep three, especially if it's from the logo, this entire conversation ends. Teams don't need pundits to tell them what demand looks like. They see it in search traffic. They see it in ticket queues. They see it in resale spikes. That's why it would be shocking if teams like Atlanta or Washington, teams playing in smaller arenas, don't eventually move games once the CBA situation clears. It would literally mean choosing to leave money on the table. And yes, some franchises have made questionable decisions before. But historically, when the Fever come to town with Caitlin Clark available, the math becomes very simple. That's why last year, once March hit, games started getting moved. And we're still weeks away from that window right now. So no, the Caitlin Clark effect didn't disappear. It didn't fade. It didn't collapse. It paused because the league is in limbo. Once the CBA is finalized and once her availability is clear, history tells us exactly what happens next. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think teams are being overly cautious, or do you think some of them are genuinely willing to lose revenue just to make a point? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want real, stat-backed breakdowns like this all season long, make sure you subscribe to WNBA Shorts. We'll be right here when the noise fades and the numbers speak.